If you missed my last video, it's probably because you do not have notifications switched on. So switch them on. And let me give you a quick recap before I go into today's video. So the DWP and the government have rolled out a new scheme to get people with disabilities or health conditions back to work. It's called the Work Well scheme, and you can watch the full video after here. But in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about a secret part of the Equality Act that most decision makers do not apply to all sorts of applications, claims, job centre appointments, and even working schemes like the Work Well scheme. But before I get into that, let's talk about the fact that you can now make your PIP applications for disability or long-term health conditions online. Yes, you can. Now, currently, it seems to be that certain postcodes only can do this. I guess they're rolling this out bit by bit, which means it's even more crucial than ever to make sure you have your right evidence. So if you don't already have my very comprehensive 365 annual planner and health journal, you need to get this, because this is going to make sure you keep a continuous log of evidence, which you can then happily photocopy, print out, do whatever you want to send in with your PIP application. It also makes it very easy to do upload online, and of course, like that, you have a complete record all in one place of all of your PIP evidence and every single thing that you need to do to apply for it. Now, you may or you may not know that currently, this is going to change though, currently in order to apply for PIP, which is a non-means tested benefit for people who have, like I said, disabilities or long-term health conditions, you don't actually need to have a diagnosis, which is why being able to evidence the effects of your disability are so important. Now, my health journal, you can actually get here on my YouTube channel from one of my websites, which I'm going to leave down below, a link down below, unless you can see the link somewhere on here. But today I want to talk about a very specific part within this that I guarantee you are not going to find anywhere else. In fact, you're not going to find anything like this anywhere else, because it's been written by me, and it is going to include various things that I know you're going to need to put in so that you can evidence your disability correctly. So if you go to pages 68 and 69 of my health journal, you're going to fall on this page here, or this section here, which is called My Disability Points Tracker. Now, these are very important because they do constitute and are protected, what I'm going to explain to you in a moment, under the Equality Act of 2010. And I can guarantee you that no employer, no job centre work coach, no team leader, or no return to work programme advisor is going to tell you about them, which is rather shocking, because they are actually your rights to request as a disabled person or someone that is suffering from a long-term or chronic health condition. So what are these points and why are they so important? Okay. Inside work assessment and employment environments and work-related systems and work-related processes, there are moments when decision makers are meant to pause when they are dealing with somebody who has a long-term health condition or a disability, to be assured that they are treating that person fairly and they are not putting them at a severe disadvantage by applying a process or by applying a decision that might have an outcome that would be detrimental to the person who has a health condition or disability, because that would be putting them at a disadvantage, which of course putting a disabled person at a disadvantage can and often does constitute disability discrimination. So to avoid that happening in these return to work or work environments, there is something called disability trigger points. Now, one of the main reasons disability trigger points are often completely ignored, I would say, by employers, job centres and things like that is because they do not know the law. And quite often, if it's DWP, for example, they don't even know their own policies. I can say that hand on heart because this is specifically the point that I won in court. They did not apply disability trigger points, and it impacted my health considerably because they did not accord me these points. So disability trigger points are specific points that are given to you and they're normally around surrounding absence and attendance. So if you fail to turn up for work, or you're often off work, or you're often missing appointments, for example, work-related appointments, you may perhaps have somebody who does not understand what disability trigger points are and says, oh, you're often off work because of your disability. Because of that, we're going to put you into a performance management review process or an attendance management review process. However, somebody who has a disability or a health condition should have disability trigger points accorded to their sickness policy, or the amount of days that they can take off work due to sickness before an attendance management process, for example, would come into play. Now, not according them these points would mean that you could put them into an attendance management process, potentially give them a written warning, or even fire them because they've had time off work, when if they have a disability or a long-term health condition, it's not something that they can control. So to fire somebody because of their disability absences is technically firing somebody because of their disability, which would be discriminative. This is why we have disability trigger points. So I'm going to explain a little bit more about them, and then I'm going to show you how you use them in this health journal. So quite simply, these disability trigger points are meant to, as I've put down here, they are intended to identify when an employee may need extra support or reasonable adjustment. So the adjustment would be, okay, this person is has, I don't know, suffering from depression at the moment. They've had time off work. When they come back to work, we need to reassess their reasonable adjustments, see if there's any extra support we can give them, reevaluate perhaps their work schedule or the tasks they're doing, etc., etc. That would be the responses of a responsible employer, somebody who clearly wants to care and look after their employee. Because if you don't look after your employees, then they are going to get ill if they're, or iller potentially if they have health conditions, and nobody wants to work in an environment when they do not feel supported. Now, whilst this is not obviously legal advice, I will go one step further here to say that under the Equality Act of 2010, employers and work-related providers, i.e. the job centre, must consider if absences are linked to a disability, and if so, may need to disregard them or adjust the trigger points. Now, in my personal example, and experience, I requested these for nearly 2 years from the Department of Work and Pensions, and it just fell totally on deaf ears. I requested them in writing, I was ignored, and this is obviously why I won that part of the case. So number one, you have to keep the evidence. So turn to the page 68 and 69, here it is, and it says here the date you requested the trigger point. So do anything like this in writing, and if possible do it by email. So here you would write the date that you requested the trigger point and who you made that to. So the full name of the employee or the person, perhaps at the job centre or in a work-related programme that you are dealing with. Now it says here the reason for trigger points, the reason for the trigger points request. Now you don't have to have a diagnosis, right? You might be suffering from something and you believe that it is impacting your health for a long time or is likely to impact your health for 12 months or more. That is legally the definition of a disability. So you would put that in there, the reason why you were requesting them. Maybe, for example, you've had cancer and you've have to, keep having treatments and that treatment makes you ill. So you would be requesting an extension, requesting trigger points so you could have a larger amount of sick leave. And very importantly here, it's got how was the request evidenced. That's very important. So if it's email, put email and put the date of the email. Underneath this, we have employer's sickness allowance, non-disabled. Now this is critical because this is exactly where DWP failed with me. They kept applying a non-disabled person's sickness allowance to me and then tried to punish me and put me into attendance management processes and all sorts of other very stressful processes, which technically and legally I shouldn't have been put in because I was not given disability trigger points because I had requested them. So it's not like a blanket, because you've got a disability, you're entitled to these. You have to request them and your employer has to consider it. And then normally they're going to give them to you. It's, if they don't give them to you, they're going to have to defend that very well as to why they wouldn't give them to you. So here it's got here, in this box here, the amount of disability trigger points agreed. The date the trigger points were agreed, because that could change. The date they were applied from, again, very important, particularly if someone is trying to fire you at a later date or take some kind of attendance management process against you at a later date. And then here we've got the next review date, because a decent employer who knows you've got a disability and has accorded you trigger points should, if they're responsible, in my opinion, wanting to be review that to make sure you are supported, you're getting everything that you need, etc. And then fundamentally, right in the box, this big old box at the bottom here, it's on page 69 for those of you that have bought this, it says, note any changes in your health in this period, or a 12-month period, it says. And here you need to note the changes. And those changes you can use, obviously, for employers, employment tribunals. You could even use this for PIP applications, because you're showing over a period of time how your health has got worse or better and how it has impacted you. Now, there is an entire section in here on disability trigger points, and that is just one of the ways that you can evidence your disability and its effects for PIP applications, PIP reviews, return to work after periods of absence, meetings, HR meetings, tribunal meetings, job centre meetings, return to work schemes, restart schemes, work well schemes, etc., etc. And if any of you have been on a work well scheme, let me know in the comments if they asked you if you required any trigger points. Just let me know. I bet none of them have asked you, which is quite shocking, really. Anyway, I hope that little piece of information has helped you all out. Let me know if it's been helpful and questions about anything else, and I'll be happy to help you out.